Welcome back. This is Doug with Break Tech, and in this video we're going to continue the development of our Tic-Tac-Toe application. We're kind of scaffold out in this video without doing a lot of the functions behind the components or the game logic. We're going to kind of scaffold out what the actual page is going to look like. We're going to start with a div with a class name of container. And that's just a div that's just going to wrap around all of our other components that are going to be injected into the DOM. In React, you have to have a top-level container whenever you're rendering, because of the way the JSX is compiled back into JavaScript, plain JavaScript. It has to have an outer wrapper component or div, or it could be any HTML or element, just so it knows where the XML syntax starts and stops. So inside that container, we have a few things. We're going to have another div, and this one is going to be the menu. And then inside the menu, we'll have I don't know, probably like an H1 that tells what this is. This is our Tic-Tac-Toe. And then in my other one, I had like an announcement that appears if the game ends. So we can go ahead and put that back in. And then we'll come back and we'll build all these components at a later time. And I'm not even including the props right now, what the components need in order to do their jobs. Right now we're just trying to get a scaffold of what the main page, what the app needs. So after an announcement class, I have a reset button, which allows us to reset the game state to back to a fresh game board. And that ends the menu. And then down below, we've got basically the board. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to actually use the game board, which is held in state, and we're going to map that using the map function of an array to return a tile for each of the elements in the array. The tiles will be the actual elements of the game board that you can click and play in. So in order to do that, it means we need to add the class, add the state with the game board in it to the component itself. And the way you're going to add state is you're going to start with your component with a constructor. Oops. Silly autocomplete. With a constructor, ignore super for now. We're not going to be using it at this point. So we'll add a state, or the constructor will set up the state, the initial data state of the component. And inside of here, we just need a game board. And this is a JSON object. So the game board is going to contain an array. And just for readability, I sort of separated it as if it were a tic-tac-toe board. Oops. So that when I was testing, I could kind of see the game board state, and I could throw in, different test cases where it looked like a tic-tac-toe board. So that's an empty tic-tac-toe board. I mean, there's no reason you have to leave a space in here. I just did it because it looks nicer to me, I guess. And then now what we can do is, since we have a state containing a game board, we can use that to place a tile in basically for each of those, each of those array elements. So to inject JavaScript directly into where we're placing HTML code, we'll use the curly braces. Say this dot state, which is going to refer to our game board, and then we'll map the function. So for each of the elements of that array, we'll do this. This will be the value of that array element. So it could be X, could be O, could be blank, and then also the index, which we'll use as a key. And then we can go ahead and return a tile component for each of those. So this kind of lays out what we need to develop, right? So we need to create an announcement component, React component. We need to create a reset button component. We need to create a tile component, and those will be basically the main components of the game. For now, that should do it. I don't know that we'll be able to see anything, right? When we render this, we can check for errors though. Yeah, so our errors are just that none of these components are defined. So what we can do is we can go ahead and create a file for each of the components. So we have announcement. We have reset button. We have tile. And I think that should do it. We also need to import each of those. Sorry about that. These are all in the same directory, so, and you also do not need to add the file extension. So now we're importing, and in each of those we need to go ahead and create a class that will then export so that this file has something to import. Probably the simplest one is going to be, I guess we can do the announcement first. So we'll go to announcement.jsx. We're going to have to import React. And the only place we've used React DOM in this project is that top level index.js, where we inject the app into, or app.js component into the index.html, so we don't need to include React DOM except at that top level, or if we're going to manipulate the actual DOM at some point. And then announcement will export default and that extends component. So if we're going to extend component, we need to add it here. And then in here, all we're going to have is a render function. And that will return and in the previous one I did, the one that's on my website, I just made the announcement only visible if there was a winner to the game or the game was a draw. And the reason I did that was not because it was especially useful. I mean, everyone knows if a Tic-Tac-Toe game is over. The reason I did it is because I wanted to test, toggling a class, which is a pretty common thing that you need to do. So we'll go ahead and do that at a later date. But for now, we can just go ahead and add a class name of visible. And then we'll fix it later. And that's basically it. So we're still going to see errors because we haven't created, we're not exporting anything from our other components, the tile or the reset button. So if we check in our console here, which you should see the same errors either in the console or the actual project. Let's see. Which are here, or in the command line, which is here. That we expect to return a value from this function in app.js, the array callback. So this is for our array callback function, or it doesn't return anything yet. So we'll get to that here in just a moment. That's it. I mean, that's the whole component. The only thing that's missing is a little bit of JavaScript for the class name to toggle based on a property that's passed into this component on whether or not the game is over. And that's it. I mean, there's nothing, there's like one line of code missing, and otherwise this is a complete component. So let's go and do the tile. The tile is super simple as well. Again, we need to import React. Oops. And then create a class. And now this is the other syntax if you don't use the curly braces. Again, we'll go ahead and just change it just for the sake of brevity. And this one's also super simple. Basically, all your components are going to always have a render function, and then it's just going to return whatever you want to display when this is rendered. And this class name is just because class is a reserved word in JavaScript, so to get by that, they've just gone ahead and changed class to class name when using HTML inside of the JavaScript. There are some Webpack, I don't even know what they're called, but you can use a Webpack, I guess, middleware or whatever to change that so that you can just use class like you normally would, which makes it easier if you're like copy and pasting something that like a designer sent you or something, or another team member who was just creating the HTML and CSS, that you could actually just copy and paste it in. But if you're working on a small project like this, it's not a big deal, so I just left it. And then this one is going to have a class name as well. I think what I used for this is I actually was using it more for testing purposes to identify each tile in the virtual DOM by number. So I passed in a prop of the location and what player's turn it was, so that if one of these tiles is clicked, then I know which player clicked it, so which play needs to be placed inside of that letter or inside of that game board location, and then I'm looking at the DOM through inspector, I can actually tell what I'm looking at. So I guess we can do that really quick. So all we're going to do is print out inside of this this tile who's played there. So we can come back to the class name. So we just do a div, and inside of that we'll have I just put a paragraph, and then we'll just send in like this .props.value, and the value is going to be whichever player played, the value of the play or the game board. And again, this may or may not. I don't think I even used this. I think this was just a completely for debugging that I added this, but I just added a tile, and then I added to it the location on the game board. That way I could tell, where the move was. And then I needed an on-click handler, right? Because every time someone clicks one of these tiles, you have to check to see whose turn it is and if somebody's already played in that tile. So we'll just add an on-click handler. And for the on-click handler, we're just going to have, I guess, just a arrow function. And then we're going to pass that the props that were passed into the tile. This is actually kind of something that stuck me up for quite a while, is that you'd think that if you create I'm going to create a tile click function, you would think that it would have access to the props of the component, but it doesn't. So if you try without passing the props into the tile click function, you will not have access to this .props.location, which is weird to me. It seems like the component is what has the prop, and it's passed from its parent component. It should have access to it, but I guess for some reason it doesn't. And then this is going to call an update function. And the update function is going to exist on our main app.js function or component. Where we're going to call the update board, and we're going to call the location, call it with the location and whose turn it is. And it seems kind of circular, and I think because Tic-Tac-Toe is like not a very complicated application, it's kind of weird that like I'm passing, so the props come from the app, right? So if we're looking here, like I'm given the props, right, from the app component. So you'd think that not only would the props be visible to the tile and all the tile's functions, you'd think that when you pass it back, that the app.js, the top level component, would know what the props were as well, but it apparently doesn't work like that. So we pass back the location and whose turn it is to update board. So update board needs to be a function that we create on top level component, the app component. And then it's going to collect a location and whose turn it is. So on our app.js, we can create a new function in here, and it's called update board, and it takes a location and whoever's turn it is, the player whose turn it is. And I guess we'll dig into that a little bit later, because it's sort of, this update board function is the business logic basically for the whole game. And then when we update the board, we have to do things like, before we can update the board, we have to test to see if the move has already been made in that square. So like If it has, we have to return and let the player choose another another board space. We have to test to see if the move and then if that's not the case, we have to test to see if the move that the player made won the game or not, or if it was the final move of the game and the board is tied, and then we need to show our announcement that the game is over and allow the player to reset the board if they choose to. We have to pass the props that we're using into the tile, and the way we do that is we give it a, let's split this up on a new line, and we give it a key, and the key is not something we're going to use, but it's something that React expects. So we'll give it a key, and we'll just use the index on the array as the key. Then we'll need the location, and now the location is the same as the key, and that'll be the index of the array as well, which seems like a duplicate, and there's probably something I could have done to just access the key, but when I tried to access the key, it wouldn't let me. So I don't know if it's only for record keeping and they don't want you to accidentally change it or something later, so they don't give you access to the key. I think that's the case. We'll pass the value, which is what is currently inside of that square. Basically, if we need to display a blank square, an X or an O, and then we need to pass if we're going to call the update board function of the app component, we need to pass that function into the tile as a prop. And we need to bind this when we do so to make sure that when we refer to this, it refers to the app components this rather than the tiles component this once we're calling it. Looks like I missed a curly brace. And I believe that should do it. We'll save it and see if we get an error. Syntax error, unexpected token. State.turn. So actually, I guess I misplaced that curly brace rather than losing it. So I think we should be like this. That's our function. That is okay. Alright, let's save that and see if we have any more errors. Alright, so not terribly useful errors at this point. We'll probably carry on and then see if we fix it when we finish the rest of the components. But I believe... See, sometimes you get a little bit more information if you're actually in the console on Chrome. Well, let's see if we can add some of the other information we might need into the state. So we're also passing in a prop for whose turn it is. The game starts with X and then alternates between X and O till the game ends. So we can add to the state the whose current turn it is, and we'll call that this.state.turn. And it'll start with X. Let's see if that fixes our error. No error is only one warning, so. I'm not sure. Let's carry on. Oh, I'm missing a return in this function. Yeah, all of this should be inside of a return. I think that's going to solve our problem. There. Actually, I think that's going to solve our problem. All right. So now we have no build errors. So we can check localhost 3000 and clear this and refresh. There's nothing to see, so it's difficult to like tell that something's happening, but it looks like everything is now working as we have some violations, but nothing, and warnings, but nothing erroring out. So that's good. Let's go ahead and add something to the CSS so that we can actually see what's going on. All right, let's go ahead and just create a tile.css and import it. And then let's add some styling so we can actually see what's going on. So in the tile, we want to have like a width of 30%, height of, I'm going to say 150 pixels, font size, this will be of the X or the O inside of the tile, and we'll go with like 60 pixels. Background, I used yellow before. Why not? I'll leave it to you guys to do some better styling. For the border, I did, and this is just kind of so I could tell the difference between where the squares were solid green before. Display, I did inline block. Floated to the left, and text align center, and line height 150 pixels. Go ahead and look at what we got here. I'll go ahead and pause the video here, and I'll come back when I figure it out. Welcome back. So the problem that I found was that when in app.js we're trying to render in a single return, we're trying to render the announcement component, the reset button component, and then I'll comment this, and then we were trying to also use the tile component. So we were getting as far as the announcement, and then it was getting to the reset button. The reset button hasn't been established yet. So it was trying to call this reset button component, load it, and then inject it, but there's nothing there. So it was failing, and I don't know why it was failing silently. That's sort of the issue. But as long as we put the reset button in, then our application starts to work. So here all I've done for the reset button is I've imported React, and then I've created a class reset button that extends component. It renders a button with an on click that just calls a prop, which is a function that we're going to pass to it from app.cs or app.js, and it has a reset in the button, and that's it. Okay, that's the entire component. So we'll go ahead and save that. We'll save this. I haven't tried this yet. We'll see what happens when we load this. And there you go. All right, so we actually have now all of our components are displaying properly. The styling isn't quite right, and we'll fix that, but But we have our H2 that was in our announcement, and then we have our announcement, which should only be showing up if if there's a winner, but we'll fix that as well. And then our reset button, which resets the state, and we'll have to create a function for that as well. So I think we're going to leave it here for this video, and we'll go ahead and start on the game logic for the next one, since we have basically a non-functional version of our application working. So thanks for watching, guys. This has been Doug with Break Tech, and I'll be back with the next video here shortly.